This field looks peaceful. Neat rows of corn stretching to the horizon, golden in the sunlight. But beneath the soil, in the DNA of every plant, lies a story that changed the world. A story of chemistry, ambition, and controversy. This is the story of Monsanto, the company that promised to feed the world and ended up becoming one of the most hated corporations on Earth. It all began in 1901 in St. Louis, Missouri, when a pharmacist named John Francis Queeny started a small chemical company. He named it after his wife, Olga Monsanto Queeny. At first, the business was modest. Their first product was saccharin, an artificial sweetener sold to Coca-Cola. But over the next few decades, Monsanto grew fast, expanding into industrial chemicals, plastics, and eventually agriculture. By the 1940s, Monsanto was producing PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, used in electrical equipment, paints, and sealants. They were stable, heat-resistant, and seemed miraculous for industry. But what made them stable also made them dangerous. PCBs didn't break down in the environment. They built up in fish, animals, and people, and by the 1970s, studies showed they were toxic. Eventually, PCBs were banned, but the damage was already done. Rivers and soils were contaminated for generations. Monsanto moved on. Chemistry was changing, and so was farming. After World War II, scientists saw chemicals as the key to a new agricultural revolution. Farmers could grow more food than ever before, if only they could control the weeds that stole nutrients from their crops. During the 1940s, researchers developed two powerful herbicides, 2,1,4-D and 2.4,5-T. Used together, they killed broadleaf plants but left grasses and grains intact. They were cheap, effective, and easy to make. But when the U.S. military went to war in Vietnam, these chemicals took on a darker purpose. The army mixed them together and sprayed millions of gallons across the jungles of Southeast Asia. The goal was to strip away cover used by enemy troops, to literally defoliate the forests. The mixture was codenamed Agent Orange. What many didn't know was that 2.4.5-T was contaminated with dioxin, one of the most toxic compounds ever created. Dioxin caused birth defects, cancers, and genetic damage. When soldiers returned home, many were sick. Vietnamese families suffered for generations. Monsanto was one of the main producers of Agent Orange. The company argued that it had simply followed government orders, that it wasn't responsible for how its products were used. But internal documents later suggested Monsanto had known about the contamination. They just didn't think it mattered. Decades later, the lawsuits began. Veterans and civilians filed cases against the company, claiming Monsanto's herbicides had poisoned them. Most settlements were small, and no one ever truly accepted responsibility. But Monsanto's reputation began to darken. Yet, the same company that had produced Agent Orange was also developing a new kind of chemical, one that promised to make farming cleaner and more efficient than ever before. In 1970, a chemist at Monsanto named John Franz made an extraordinary discovery. He synthesized a molecule called glyphosate. It was a simple compound, but it turned out to be a highly effective herbicide. It worked by blocking a key enzyme that plants needed to grow. Without it, they withered and died. What made glyphosate revolutionary was its selectivity. It killed nearly every plant it touched, but it broke down quickly in the soil, leaving little residue. Farmers could spray it across fields before planting, clearing weeds without harming future crops. Monsanto called it Roundup. Roundup became a global sensation. It was powerful, easy to use, and, according to Monsanto, safer than any herbicide before it. Ads showed happy farmers spraying fields, smiling families in gardens, and taglines like, "Roundup, the herbicide that gets to the root of the problem." By the 1980s, Roundup was used in over 100 countries. It made Monsanto billions. But there was still one problem. Roundup couldn't be sprayed directly on crops. It would kill them too. So Monsanto's scientists began working on a radical idea. What if they could make plants immune to their own herbicide? Using new tools from molecular biology, they inserted a bacterial gene into soybean DNA, giving the plants the ability to survive glyphosate. The result was a new kind of seed, the world's first Roundup-ready crop. When these seeds hit the market in 1996, farmers were astonished. They could spray entire fields with Roundup, killing every weed in sight, while their crops thrived untouched. It was faster, cheaper, and simpler than anything before. Within a few years, Roundup-ready soybeans and corn dominated American agriculture. Today, over 90% of soybeans in the U.S. contain Monsanto's patented genes. Monsanto had not just created a chemical, it had engineered a system. But that system came with strings attached. Farmers couldn't save or replant seeds from one season to the next, something they'd done for millennia. Instead, they had to buy new seeds every year, signing contracts that gave Monsanto the right to inspect their fields. Farmers who saved seeds risked being sued, and Monsanto didn't hesitate to take them to court. Between 1997 and 2010, Monsanto filed hundreds of lawsuits against farmers for patent infringement. Some were accused of saving seeds. Others said they'd been contaminated accidentally, by pollen drifting from nearby fields. Monsanto said it was protecting its intellectual property, but to many farmers, it felt like bullying. At the same time, Monsanto began buying smaller seed companies, giving it enormous control over the market. It wasn't just selling herbicide anymore, it was selling the very foundation of global agriculture. By the 2000s, Monsanto controlled the genetics of much of the world's corn, soy, and cotton, but nature adapts. Over time, weeds evolved resistance to glyphosate. The more farmers sprayed, the more resistant the weeds became. Superweeds, plants that could survive heavy doses of Roundup, began taking over fields. To fight them, farmers turned to older, harsher chemicals like dicamba and 2,4-D, the same compounds used decades before. The promise of easy weed control was fading, and Roundup's miracle reputation started to crack. Then came the biggest blow of all. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer reviewed decades of studies and declared glyphosate probably carcinogenic to humans. Monsanto immediately went on the offensive. The company accused the scientists of bias, claiming their methods were flawed. It pointed to regulatory agencies, the EPA in the US and the EFSA in Europe, that said glyphosate was safe when used properly. But behind the scenes, a different story was emerging. Internal emails, later revealed in court, showed Monsanto employees had ghostwritten scientific papers defending glyphosate's safety. They'd coordinated with officials in the Environmental Protection Agency to influence reviews, and they'd even launched online campaigns to discredit journalists and activists who questioned them. The scandal became known as the Monsanto Papers. In 2018, a California jury awarded nearly $300 million to Dwayne Johnson, a school groundskeeper who said years of spraying Roundup had given him cancer. Thousands of similar lawsuits followed. Some juries awarded damages in the billions. That same year, the German pharmaceutical giant Bayer bought Monsanto for $63 billion. Bayer hoped to combine its agricultural business with Monsanto's biotech expertise. Instead, it inherited one of the largest legal liabilities in corporate history. Within months of the merger, Bayer's stock price plunged. Investors were furious. By 2023, Bayer had paid over $10 billion to settle claims, while continuing to deny that glyphosate caused cancer. To escape Monsanto's toxic reputation, Bayer quietly retired the Monsanto name. It would no longer appear on buildings, seed bags, or products. But the seeds themselves, the genetics, the patents, the technology, all remained. Monsanto was gone in name, but not in influence. Today, glyphosate is still the world's most widely used herbicide. Roundup and its generic versions are sprayed on millions of acres of farmland every year. Most of the food we eat, from soy-fed livestock to corn syrup and processed snacks, can be traced in some way back to Monsanto's inventions. Supporters argue that Monsanto's technologies helped feed a growing world, reducing hunger and increasing yields. Critics say the opposite, that it locked farmers into dependence, poisoned ecosystems, and put profit above people. What's undeniable is that Monsanto transformed agriculture. It turned biology into business. It made genes a commodity. And it blurred the line between innovation and control. Standing in a modern field today, surrounded by genetically engineered crops, it's hard to see where Monsanto ends and farming begins. The seeds that once symbolized independence are now intellectual property. The chemicals once hailed as progress are now at the center of a global health debate. The story of Monsanto is not just about one company. It's a story about the age of science and industry, about how our ability to manipulate nature has outpaced our ability to understand the consequences. Monsanto promised to feed the world, and in a way it did. But it also left a legacy of distrust, a warning that even the best intentions can have unintended costs. Because the real question isn't just whether glyphosate causes cancer or whether genetically modified seeds are safe. The deeper question is, who controls life itself? And when the tools of creation belong to corporations, what happens to everyone else? Monsanto's name may have disappeared, but its shadow stretches across every field, every harvest, and every dinner plate on the planet. It's the legacy of a company that changed the world and paid the price. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on this story? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.